I went to return a screwdriver. My neighbor said, you came on the perfect night. ATXP icon. I went to return a screwdriver. My neighbor said, you came on the perfect night. Part 1. Stability with hairline cracks. This is the story of Marcus Hale and his wife, Rebecca Hale. The screwdriver had been sitting on the kitchen counter for 11 days. Marcus knew because he'd counted the way a man counts things when he has nothing larger to count. Each morning he made coffee, glanced at the orange-handled tool resting beside the fruit bowl, and told himself he'd return it that evening. Each evening he forgot, or pretended to forget, because returning it meant walking 3 doors down to Olivia Trent's porch. And lately Marcus had been avoiding small encounters with anyone who might ask, "How's Rebecca?" He didn't have a good answer. He wasn't sure he wanted one. Marcus and Rebecca had been married 14 years. They lived in a narrow blue house on Linden Street, with a porch that sagged on the left side and a hedge that Rebecca pruned twice a month with the kind of focus most people reserve for prayer. Theirs was the quiet kind of marriage, the kind that no one worried about because nothing visible ever broke. But underneath the routine, something had been thinning for a long while now, a softness that used to live between them, replaced lately by politeness. And politeness, Marcus had begun to suspect, was the language of people who had run out of things to say. This is a story about the slow erosion of attention and what a man learns about his own life only after standing in someone else's living room. That Thursday evening, Rebecca was on the phone in the bedroom. He could hear her voice through the wall, low, animated, occasionally laughing in that particular way she hadn't laughed at his jokes in years. He didn't think much of it. He'd stopped thinking much of a lot of things. "Beck," he called, "I'm walking the screwdriver back to Olivia. Need anything?" A pause. Then, "No, I'm good." 2 words, clipped but not unkind. He'd taken to measuring her tone the way a sailor measures wind. He pulled on his jacket, picked up the screwdriver, and stepped out into the late October air. The street was quiet in that suburban way. Porch lights blinking on one by one, a dog barking 3 yards over, the smell of someone's fireplace beginning its season. Marcus liked his street. He liked the predictability of it. He liked knowing whose recycling bin was whose. But Olivia's house was lit up tonight in a way it usually wasn't. Olivia Trent had moved in 2 years ago after her husband died. She was perhaps 50, perhaps a little older. Marcus had never asked, and she had never volunteered. She kept to herself, watered her lawn at 6 in the morning. And once, when Marcus's car battery died, she had jumped it without small talk and walked back to her house before he could properly thank her. He liked her for that. He liked people who didn't perform. Tonight, though, 3 cars he didn't recognize were parked at her curb. A black Lexus with tinted windows, a silver SUV, a small red sedan with a magnetic real estate sign clinging stubbornly to the door. Through her front window, Marcus could see the silhouettes of several people standing, not sitting. And standing meant tension, even he knew that. He almost turned back. Instead, some old instinct of neighborliness pushed him up the steps. He'd return the screwdriver, mumble an apology for interrupting, and be home in time for the second half of the news. He knocked. Olivia opened the door so quickly it was as if she'd been waiting on the other side. Her eyes, usually steady, gray, undramatic, were wide. She looked at him for half a second and something passed behind her face. Relief, calculation, both. "Marcus," she said just above a whisper, "you came on the perfect night." He held up the screwdriver, suddenly absurd. "I just wanted to." "Come in, Olivia, you've got company." "I can, please." Her hand closed around his wrist with a quiet firmness that surprised him. Not panicked, not theatrical, just needed. "Just for a few minutes, stand by the wall. Don't say anything yet. You'll understand." And before he could decline, before he could even think about Rebecca laughing softly through the bedroom wall, Marcus stepped over the threshold of Olivia Trent's house and into a room full of strangers who, the moment they saw him, went silent. A man in a charcoal suit, seated in the largest armchair, slowly lifted his eyes. He had the kind of face that had been on the side of a bus once. "And who," the man said, "is this?" Olivia smiled, a small, careful smile, and closed the door behind Marcus. The man in the charcoal suit was Daniel Cross. Marcus didn't recognize him immediately, but the room did. There were 5 other people present. A woman with a leather portfolio balanced on her knees, a younger man in glasses tapping a pen against a legal pad, a heavy-set woman near the window who looked like she'd been crying, and 2 men in matching navy jackets that suggested they'd come together and probably worked for Cross. The air in the room had the heaviness of a conversation interrupted mid-sentence. "This is Marcus Hale," Olivia said, her voice perfectly level. "My neighbor. He's known me a long time. I asked him to come." Marcus's mouth opened slightly. She had not asked him to come. He had walked over to return a screwdriver. But before he could correct her, her eyes met his, just for a heartbeat, and there was something in them that asked, with a strange, dignified quietness, "Trust me, please." He closed his mouth. "Sit, Mr. Hale," Daniel Cross said, gesturing to an empty chair as if the house were his own. "We were just discussing some property matters." "Some fraudulent property matters," said the woman with the portfolio, without looking up. "Linda," Cross said gently, the way one might correct a child at a dinner table. "Let's not poison the well." Marcus sat. The screwdriver was still in his hand. He set it carefully on the coffee table, and for some reason no one in the room could stop looking at it. This small, ordinary, orange-handled thing, as if it had wandered in from a different story. What followed, over the next 40 minutes, was a conversation Marcus barely understood at first, and then understood far too well. Olivia owned a strip of land behind her house, 3 acres her late husband had inherited from a great-uncle. Daniel Cross's company had been trying to buy it for 2 years to extend a development project. Olivia had refused. Cross had then, allegedly, begun a quieter campaign. A permit lost at the city office, a sudden tax reassessment, an offer made to her late husband's brother for a share he didn't legally hold. The woman near the window, Olivia's sister-in-law, it turned out, had come tonight to admit, in front of witnesses, that Cross had pressured her to sign something she shouldn't have. Marcus sat very still. He realized slowly, walked into the kind of moment people spend years building toward. And what surprised him most was not Cross's calmness, or Olivia's quiet courage, or even the sister-in-law's airs. What surprised him was that he was thinking, of all things, about Rebecca, about the laugh through the wall, about how, 3 weeks ago, she had bought a new perfume and told him it was a sample she'd grabbed at the mall. He had nodded and forgotten about it within an hour. He was good at forgetting things he didn't want to look at. Now, sitting in a stranger's living room, watching another man's careful lies dissolve into the air, Marcus was beginning to wonder if he had been forgetting things on purpose for a very long time. "Mr. Hale," Cross said suddenly, turning to him with a warmth that did not reach his eyes. "You're a quiet observer. What's your read on all this, neighbor to neighbor?" Marcus blinked. "I'm not sure Has Mrs. Trent ever struck you as, shall we say, unstable? Prone to fixations?" There it was. The question wasn't a question, it was a door being opened for him to walk through. Cross was inviting him to be useful, to be sensible, to be the kind of man who didn't make trouble for powerful men. Marcus glanced at Olivia. She was looking at her hands. "No," Marcus said. "She's the steadiest person on our street." It was a small sentence. He felt it land in the room like a stone dropped into a still pond. The young man with the legal pad started writing faster. Cross's smile thinned by exactly 1 degree. Olivia exhaled, barely, and said, "Half to Marcus, half to no one, I don't know. Maybe like this story or subscribe or something." Marcus turned to her. "What?" "Nothing," she said softly, smoothing her sleeve. "I'm tired, I'm saying things." Cross frowned, irritated by the interruption, and pivoted back to the woman with the portfolio. The moment passed, but Marcus, for some reason, kept staring at Olivia's profile a second longer than he should have. The way a man stares at a page when he's not sure he read the line correctly. Then he thought of Rebecca again, and realized with a quiet, sinking certainty that she had not asked who he was going to see tonight, not once. Not even a reflex. She had stopped wondering about him a long time ago. It was nearly 11 when Marcus walked home. The meeting had ended without ceremony. Cross had stood, buttoned his jacket, and said, "We'll be in touch through counsel," in a voice that suggested he was already calculating which of his lawyers to call first. The woman with the portfolio had handed Marcus a card. "If you're willing to give a statement," she'd said, "it would matter." He'd put the card in his pocket without answering. The sister-in-law had hugged Olivia for a long time at the door, and Olivia had hugged her back the way you hug someone you've forgiven before they've finished apologizing. When the room emptied, Olivia turned to Marcus. "I owe you an explanation," she said. "You owe me a screwdriver back eventually," he said. He didn't smile, but he meant it gently. She told him the truth then, that she'd been planning the meeting for weeks, that Cross had insisted on having his own people present, and she had felt outnumbered in her own house, that she had hoped Hoped, she said, not planned, that someone neutral might walk by, knock on a door, give her one witness who wasn't on a payroll. She hadn't expected that someone to be him. But when she'd seen him through the peephole holding that ridiculous orange screwdriver, she'd thought, of course it's him, the quietest man on the block, the one who never gossips. I used you, she said. I want to be honest about that. You didn't, Marcus said. You let me in, there's a difference. She looked at him for a long moment. You're a kind man, Marcus. He almost laughed, because the thing was he wasn't sure he was. He was a quiet man and people often confused those. He walked home along the empty street. The wind had picked up, his porch light was on. Inside, the kitchen was dark, but a glow came from down the hall. Rebecca's reading lamp, still on in the bedroom. He hung his jacket, took off his shoes, walked down the hall. She was sitting up in bed, scrolling her phone, the screen reflected faintly in her eyes. She didn't look up when he entered. Long return, she said. Something was happening over there, he said. I got pulled into it. He sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at her, really looked, the way he hadn't in maybe a year. The line of her shoulder, the way her thumb moved across the screen, the new perfume, faint, on her collar at almost midnight on a weeknight when she had been supposedly home all evening. Beck, he said. Who were you on the phone with earlier? Her thumb paused, just for a second. Diane from work, she said. Diane, yes. He nodded slowly. He did not raise his voice. He did not accuse. He simply sat with the silence and let it grow, the way Olivia had let silences grow in her living room, and he watched with a strange clinical clarity as Rebecca's face shifted through 3 small expressions in the space of 4 seconds. Irritation, then calculation, then something softer and more dangerous, which was exhaustion. The exhaustion of someone tired of pretending. Marcus, she said finally, lowering the phone. Don't do this tonight. I'm not doing anything. You have that look. What look? Like you've decided something. He hadn't actually, not yet. But he understood, sitting there, that she had long before tonight. That whatever had been thinning between them had thinned not because of distance, but because she had been gently, steadily, walking somewhere else. And he had been so busy not noticing that he had become, in his own marriage, a kind of polite stranger. How long? He asked. His voice was almost conversational. She didn't ask how long what. That was the whole answer. A while, she said. Not the way you're thinking. It's not, I don't know what it is. Is it Diane? No. A pause. It's someone from the gym. The gym. He almost smiled at the smallness of it. 14 years, and it ended at a gym. Do you love him? I don't know. Do you love me? She didn't answer, and the not answering was the answer. And they both knew it, and neither of them cried, because they had passed that exit a long time ago without realizing. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight, he said. Marcus, it's okay, Beck. I need a night. He stood. He picked up the pillow from his side. He walked out, and as he passed the kitchen, he saw the empty space on the counter where the screwdriver had sat for 11 days. It struck him, dimly, that he had returned the wrong tool. 4 months later, it was February, and Marcus was living in a 1-bedroom apartment above a bakery on 8th Street. The apartment smelled like bread in the mornings, and like nothing in particular at night. He had taken almost nothing from the house. Some clothes, his books, a single framed photograph of his mother that Rebecca had never liked. He hadn't fought for the rest. Fighting, he had discovered, required a kind of belief in the future that he no longer possessed about that particular life. The cross matter had unfolded faster than anyone expected. Marcus had given his statement, just the truth, what he saw, what he heard, what was said. The woman with the leather portfolio had been an attorney named Linda Reyes, and she had been quietly building a case against Cross for nearly a year. Marcus's testimony, ordinary and undramatic, had been the small piece that locked everything else into place. An outsider, a neighbor, no axe to grind, no money in play. By December, Cross's company had withdrawn its bid. By January, 2 local journalists had run a story. By February, Cross had resigned from the board of his own foundation. It was not ruin exactly. Men like Cross are rarely ruined, but it was a kind of public quieting, and in the small world of that town it was enough. Olivia kept her land. She brought Marcus a casserole one Sunday. At his new apartment, she didn't stay long. She stood in his doorway, looked around at the bare walls, and said, "You don't have a single picture up. I haven't decided what to put. That's honest. At least." She left the casserole and a bottle of wine and a small note that said only, "Thank you for the screwdriver." He smiled at it for the first real time in weeks. Rebecca, meanwhile, was telling a different story. He heard it in pieces. the way you hear things in a town where everyone knows everyone's business but pretends not to. From a former coworker who ran into him at the hardware store, from his sister who was still on social media, from an old friend who called awkwardly to check in. The story, as Rebecca told it, was that Marcus had become cold, that he had grown distant in the last year, that she had tried, really tried, but he had stopped seeing her, that the marriage had been hollow long before anyone else came into the picture, that the man from the gym had simply been the person who made her feel seen again, that she wasn't proud, but she wasn't apologizing either, because nobody had asked her in 15 years how she was doing. There were grains of truth in it. That was what stung. Marcus had grown distant. He had stopped looking at her with attention. He had let routine become a kind of soft armor against intimacy. He could not, in good conscience, claim he had been a man on fire for his marriage. But he also knew, and this was the harder thing, that her version conveniently skipped certain rooms. The years he had cooked dinner alone while she worked late. The way he had asked, more than once, if something was wrong, and she had said nothing, "I'm just tired." The fact that she had not asked who he was going to see the night he walked over to Olivia's. Not because she didn't care if he was cheating, but because she had stopped being curious about him as a person. And curiosity, Marcus now understood, was the first form of love and the last to die. He didn't correct her version. He didn't write a single message defending himself. He let the story exist in the air, and he let people believe whatever made their lives easier. Something was changing in him, slowly. He started reading again. He took long walks at strange hours. He bought a small, terrible plant for the windowsill and managed not to kill it. He went to the courthouse alone the day the divorce was finalized, and afterward he sat on a bench in the cold and ate a bagel and felt, not happy but clear, which was a feeling he had nearly forgotten existed. One evening in late February, Olivia knocked on his door. She held a paper bag. "I don't know if this is appropriate," she said, "but I baked too much." He let her in. They sat at his small kitchen table, and they didn't talk about Cross, and they didn't talk about Rebecca, and they barely talked at all. They drank tea. She left after an hour. At the door, she paused. "You know what you did, right, that night?" "I told the truth." "You did more than that," she said. "You let yourself be seen. Some men can't." She left. And for a long time after she was gone, Marcus stood by the window, watching the empty street, and he understood, in a way he had not understood for many years, that being seen by someone, even for a moment, even by accident, was the thing he had been quietly starving for. He saw Rebecca one last time in late spring. It was at a hardware store, of all places. He was buying a hinge for the cabinet door of his new apartment. He had finally signed a longer lease, and she was in the aisle with the paint chips, holding a strip of pale greens up to the light. She didn't see him at first. He almost left. He almost set down the hinge and walked out and let the cabinet stay broken forever. Instead, he walked over. "Beck?" She turned. Her hand went briefly and without thinking to her hair. It was shorter now. It suited her. She was wearing the perfume he didn't recognize anymore. "Marcus." A small, careful smile. "How are you?" "I'm all right. You look good?" "You too." A pause. The kind that in a different life would have been comfortable. "How's the apartment?" she asked. "Small, quiet." "I have a plant." She laughed, just a little. "You have a plant?" "It's mostly alive." She looked down at the paint chip. "We're repainting the kitchen, He noticed it. He let it pass without flinching. There had been a time, even 3 months ago, when that single word would have done something to him. Tonight it was just a word. The way home was just a word now. The way forever had been, all along, only a word. "That's nice," he said. "The yellow always darkened in the afternoon. You used to mention it. You remember that?" "I remember most of it, Beck." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. He could see in her face the small flicker of a particular need. The need to be told that she had been loved well, that she had not been the only one at fault, that her version of the story was the right one. He had seen that need in her for years, and he had failed often to feed it. He understood now that no one person could have fed it forever. He understood also that this was not entirely his failure and not entirely hers, and that some marriages simply unraveled in the quietest possible rooms, with no one to blame and everyone to forgive. "I heard about the Cross thing," she said. "That was you, wasn't it? The neighbor, the witness. It was me. You never told me. I told you something was happening over there." "That night." She was quiet. "I didn't ask," she said softly. "Did I know you didn't?" She looked at the paint chip in her hand. She looked at him. There was something in her eyes. Not quite regret, not quite grief, but a kind of recognition, the way a person looks at a house they used to live in and realizes the light is different now. I'm sorry, Marcus. I know. I don't mean for everything. I mean for not asking that night, other nights. I know, Beck. I'm sorry too, for my part. He didn't list his parts. He didn't itemize his failures. He didn't perform the apology. He just let it exist between them, small and true, like a coin set down on a counter. Are you happy? She asked. He thought about it. He thought about the bakery smell in the mornings, the walks, the plant, Olivia's casserole on a Sunday in February, the quiet, unremarkable fact that he had begun lately to look forward to ordinary things again. I'm becoming someone, he said. I don't know who yet. She nodded slowly. That's more than I have. You'll get there, will I? Yes, he said, and he meant it. There was no edge in it, no score being settled. He had loved her for 14 years, and a part of him would always wish her well, even if he never saw her again, which he suspected he wouldn't, not really, not in any way that mattered. She held the paint chip up one more time, distractedly, then folded it into her palm. Take care of your plant, she said. Take care of yourself, Beck. He watched her walk to the register. He didn't follow. He bought his hinge. He walked out into the bright spring afternoon, and the air smelled like cut grass and warm asphalt, and he stood for a moment on the sidewalk and let himself feel it, the closing of a door that had been ajar for 14 years. That night, back in the apartment, he fixed the cabinet. The hinge was a little stiff. He used the orange-handled screwdriver Olivia had given him, finally, to keep. For emergencies, she'd said, smiling, the last time she'd been over. When he was done, he sat at the kitchen table and looked at the small, terrible plant on the windowsill. It had, against all odds, put out a new leaf. He did not cry. He did not call anyone. He did not write a message to Rebecca or to Olivia or to anyone at all. He just sat there in the quiet in his own life and listened to the old buildings settle around him and thought very simply, I went to return a screwdriver, and somehow I came home. Outside, the streetlight flickered once, then steadied. Inside, the kettle ticked as it cooled. And somewhere, in another house, in another kitchen, someone he used to know was choosing a shade of green for a wall that was no longer his to look at. He turned off the light. He went to bed. He slept, for the first time in a long time, like a man who had stopped waiting to be asked where he had been.